Howdy, howdy. This is not something that I normally do, and by normally do, I mean posting a video onto my YouTube channel. But I want to talk about something a little important, something close to my heart. Proximity-wise, of course. I live in Los Angeles right now, and in the news over the past week, there has been a lot of talk about some riots that are happening here. And I just want to clear the air on some of that, offer my own perspective on what's going on. I'm not an expert, obviously, but I do live here, and I do have eyewitness testimony to the fact that no, the city is not, it has not been, is not currently a gigantic war zone of violence and looting and arson. That's just not happening. Basically, what the mainstream media wants you to believe is that there are protests happening that have escalated into riots where everybody is completely unhinged and they're blowing things up left and right, and across the city we're in a state of pandemonium. Again, not true. They are selectively taking that one clip from when was it, last Thursday? Of some self-driving cars getting lit on fire. Also, the big protests on Saturday, where there is some chaos happening in the street, and they're splicing that together with some super cool shots of the police marching and running to meet the crowd and to save everybody from themselves, I guess. I don't know. But the reality is a much different situation. Let's talk about the build-up. Long story short, ICE agents, the immigration guys, they were ordered to exponentially increase the number of arrests and deportations of undocumented immigrants in LA, prompting the people of LA to protest ICE as well as the police, who, as it turns out, were assisting ICE in their raids despite municipal restrictions on them doing so due to LA's status as a sanctuary city, where, local authorities aren't supposed to comply with federal immigration enforcement. Anyway, certain government officials decided that any resistance of ICE or the police by both citizens and denizens of Los Angeles was completely unacceptable, and to make that point crystal clear, deployed the National Guard, without the consent of the governor, which is, kind of unprecedented, and the Marines, which is just silly, to LA without, I don't know, man. It was a ridiculous situation. Neither of them were properly accommodated for. They had no place to sleep. They were just kind of sent there because the optics of the situation was the mainstream media is saying, this is a terrible situation that's happening. A couple 2-tree businesses got broken into. Send in the kill squad. And then the governor's what? You shouldn't do that. How dare you? That's not in your jurisdiction. Shut up, dude. You're the governor. Do something about it. He's saying one thing, he's doing another thing. He wants to be president so bad it makes him look stupid. Anyway, but that left the locals to protest not only against the deportations made by ICE, but the ever-increasing occupation of the city. So, the main justification, of course, that you see for that increased occupation is all the violence that's happening. It's not. The median protester is not a rioting, looting arsonist. I live here. 99% of them are completely peaceful. The city, again, is not in flames. That was a January thing. It is now June. Catch up. And also, most of these protests were happening in downtown LA, but not even the whole of downtown LA. Just, no joke, a couple blocks. I went to a few of these protests, and I had to, find some of them. It took a while. And when I got there, expecting a full-out brawl to break out, it was, boring stuff, praying.
Love, for mercy, for compassion, for justice, for a city.
Speaking.
Immigrants contribute. Immigrants work hard.
And dancing with some mariachi music. That was pretty cool, though. That was the most violent thing I saw all day. And by violent, I mean they were totally killing it up there. It was awesome. Well, that's ominous. Now, I didn't get to go to the big one that happened on Saturday because I had to work. I work at a grocery store. Saturday is normally the busiest day of the week. This particular Saturday was completely dead. There was like nobody shopping inside, presumably because a lot of the grocery buying public was out protesting. Because again, it was an enormous protest. There in LA, there were multiple stations where people were protesting. There were thousands of people collectively, and across the entire country, I think it's an estimated I heard like 2 million people were out protesting during that day. So that would make sense. And again, if you look at the footage, like not the chopped up, concocted with silly buzzwords that the media is feeding you, but the actual like primary sources of these protests, it's peaceful. It's completely peaceful. That's not true. There is violence happening at these protests. And if you have any reference for history of protesting in this country, you know where it comes from. It's them hitting people with their batons for no reason, shooting them point blank with rubber bullets, fumigating the entire area with the delectable scent of tear gas. And there's also some footage of them forcing their horses to trample people. They could break a leg doing that. No Gucci. No bueno. Oh yeah, and the National Guard and the Marines were also there, but they didn't really get to do much. Like, they stood around, definitely, and they blocked off some of the federal buildings, which is what the police were also doing. So it felt like, hey guys, I bet you got something better to do. You can go home, you know. You don't have to be here. I guess you do because you're ordered to be here, but like, come on. But yeah, I want to reiterate another point that these protests, most of them, were all consolidated by the couple blocks that contain the like municipal buildings in downtown LA, like near the city hall, near the courthouses, that sort of thing. On Saturday, there were multiple stations, like all peppered throughout the city where people were protesting, but also through like every major city in the country that was happening. So, you know. But the news cycle has moved on because the protests they're not exciting anymore. They're not, quote unquote violent, terrible things that are happening here that everyone should be scared of, that necessitates the use of deploying the Marines for some reason. No. The world has moved on. Missiles are happening in the Middle East, and now it's not cool to talk about the protests anymore. It's been a week. All right, let's move on, guys. But I just wanted to make this video because it's still a salient topic, because there's more insidious violence happening with the ICE agents' attempt to, again, hit their astronomical deportation quota by any means necessary. It's still happening. They're showing up at people's homes. They're showing up at schools, the workplaces, stores, graduation ceremonies. They're even snatching people just right off the street, tossing them into some unmarked van to send them off to God knows where. No trial or nothing. Yeah, no trial, no due process. ICE has kidnapped people at their own scheduled immigration hearings. Alright, these are people that are going through all the proper channels, doing things, quote unquote, the right way, and then they're getting punished for that. So that's pretty cool, right? That's awesome. Love that. There was even an instance, there's a video of this, where a woman was literally in a meeting with her lawyer, and ICE kidnapped her while her lawyer was in the bathroom. She took a little potty break, and when she came back, her client was gone because ICE had decided, you know what, let's just snatch her up. Don't worry about it. Like, what is that? ICE has been taking anyone they possibly can. Not the criminals, not like the dangerous murderers. They ran out of those and they're decided like, I guess we just gotta get everybody, right? Anyone they can, anyone at all, without offering them any due process that they're entitled to in this country. And the fact that they're eschewing due process in this instance and taking literally anyone that's probably undocumented, means that they're, by a consequence of that, deporting some US citizens. They're not checking. They're not checking. And that's a very dangerous precedent for what the government is allowed to do to anyone it doesn't like. I mean, let's be honest, they could already do that, but not at this scale. So it's just not legal what they're doing. But aside from all of those legal ramifications, let's be honest, they're tearing families apart. They're stealing people away from their homes, the lives that they've built here, and they're unceremoniously dumping them somewhere down south with no respect for their well-being whatsoever. That's the real violence that happened and is still happening. It's the violation of people's rights, and it's the violation of their humanity. It's still happening, not just in LA, but in every major city in this country. Now, I've only lived here in LA for a few months at this point. So, who am I to talk about this? But, I just couldn't have it on my conscience not to talk about this, because it's just not fair that I should be allowed to live here in this city when others who have been living here for much longer, decades in some cases, and some people who were actually born here, they just get disappeared away by some guys wearing masks with no identification. I think that the collective interaction of people and cultures from all over the world is a huge part of what makes this city special, and it's a huge part of what makes this country special. And that's not something that I want to go away. And judging by the turnout of the protests, I am far from the only person who feels that way. So yeah, just wanted to get that out there, get that off my chest. Just be vigilant. If you want to look into this yourself, which you definitely should, you shouldn't just take my word for it. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on the matter. Do some research, find primary sources or secondary sources that aren't trying to, manipulate what you're seeing. Be kind to people, and stay safe. Love you guys. Later, man.